I heard my sister's voice through the bathroom door before I realized she was talking about me. She's just old and bitter, Robert. Mom and Dad wanted us to share equally. Evelyn doesn't get to keep everything just because she played the martyr. I stood there in my parents' hallway, my hand frozen on the doorknob of the linen closet, a stack of fresh towels pressed against my chest. The house was silent, except for Karen's voice drifting from the kitchen, where she must have stepped away to take the call. She thought I was upstairs giving Dad his afternoon medication. I know. She's going to fight it, but legally, we're entitled to half. 15 years of playing nurse doesn't change what's in the will. Something cold settled in my stomach. Not surprise, exactly. More like confirmation of something I'd felt coming for months, maybe years. I set the towels down carefully on the hall table and walked into the kitchen. Karen's back was to me, her phone pressed to her ear, her designer handbag on the counter. She'd driven up from Charlotte for the day, her first visit in 3 months. She turned when she heard my footsteps, and her face went through several expressions in quick succession. Shock, guilt, then something harder, defiant. "I'll call you back," she said into the phone, not taking her eyes off me. She ended the call and slipped the phone into her pocket. "Evelyn, I didn't hear you come down." Clearly. We stood there, looking at each other across the kitchen where our mother used to make Sunday dinners, where I now cooked soft foods 3 times a day because Dad couldn't chew properly anymore and Mom got confused by the microwave. "How long have you been planning this?" I asked. Karen lifted her chin. "Planning what? Having a private conversation with my husband? Planning to contest Mom and Dad's decision. Planning to take half of everything after I've spent 15 years taking care of them. You chose to do that, Evelyn. No one forced you." The words hit me like a slap, but I kept my voice steady. "You're right. No one forced me. Just like no one forced you to move to Charlotte, or to visit twice a year if we're lucky, or to send a card on their birthdays, but never call. I have a life, Evelyn. I have a job, a husband, responsibilities. Not all of us can just put our lives on hold to play nursemaid." "Nursemaid," I repeated the word slowly. "Is that what you think I've been doing? What else would you call it?" I could have told her right then. About the 3 a.m. falls and the hospital visits. About learning to change adult diapers and manage medications and talk Dad down from his confusion when he forgot where he was. About selling my condo and moving into their guest room because they couldn't be left alone anymore. About putting my retirement on hold and my relationship with Tom on permanent pause because there were only so many hours in a day and something had to give. Instead, I said, "When was the last time you stayed overnight? When was the last time you helped Mom into the shower, or held Dad's hand through a bad night, or cleaned up after his accidents? That's not fair. You know I can't just drop everything and drive up here every time something happens. Something happens every day, Karen. Every single day." She looked away, her jaw tight. "Mom and Dad wanted us to be treated equally. That's what they always said. That was before Mom's Alzheimer's got worse, before Dad's stroke, before they understood what the next 10, 15 years were going to look like and who was actually going to be here for it. So you manipulated them into changing their will." "I didn't manipulate anyone. They made their own decision, with a lawyer present, fully competent, because they wanted to make sure the person who sacrificed everything to take care of them wouldn't be left with nothing while you walked away with half." Karen's face flushed red. "This is exactly what I'm talking about. You think you're so noble, so selfless, but really, you're just controlling. You moved in here. You isolated them from everyone else. And now you think you deserve everything because you chose to put your life on hold." The unfairness of it took my breath away. Isolated them? I'd been the one calling her, begging her to visit more often. I'd been the one sending photos and updates, trying to keep her involved in their lives. "Get out," I said quietly. "What?" "Get out of this house. Now. You can't kick me out. This is my parents' house too. And they asked you to leave 3 months ago when you told Mom she was being dramatic about her memory problems. Dad asked me to call you and tell you not to come back until you could be respectful. I didn't tell him about this visit because I thought maybe you'd actually come to help. I should have known better. That was a lie. Dad hadn't asked her to leave. But in that moment, looking at my sister's entitled face, I didn't care. Karen grabbed her handbag. "You're going to regret this, Evelyn. My lawyer will be in touch." She paused at the door. "You know what? You're 71 years old. You should be enjoying your retirement, traveling, living your life. Instead, you're stuck here playing house with two people who barely know who you are anymore. And when they're gone, you'll have nothing. No career, no husband, no life. Just a house full of medical equipment and bad memories. I actually feel sorry for you." She left before I could respond. The front door closed with a gentle click that felt worse than if she'd slammed it. I stood in the kitchen for a long time, listening to the sound of her car driving away, listening to the familiar creaks and sighs of the old house. From upstairs, I heard Dad call out, confused about where he was again. "Coming, Dad," I called back, my voice remarkably steady. But first, I walked to the study and pulled out the filing cabinet I'd been maintaining for the past 8 years. Every receipt, every medical bill, every expense report I'd submitted to myself, documenting exactly what caregiving cost, because something told me I was going to need them. The lawsuit papers arrived 2 weeks later. Karen was contesting the will on grounds of undue influence. Her lawyer argued that I had manipulated our elderly, vulnerable parents into leaving me everything while excluding her. I called my lawyer, Richard Morrison, whom Mom and Dad had used for 40 years. He'd been at the meeting when they revised their will, had witnessed their signatures, had confirmed their sound mind. "This isn't uncommon," Richard told me over the phone. "Family members who haven't been involved in caregiving often don't understand the reality of what it costs, both financially and personally. But we have a strong case. Your parents were very clear about their wishes. What do I need to do? Document everything. Every hour of care you've provided, every expense you've incurred, every time you've put their needs before your own. Can you do that?" I looked at my filing cabinet, at the organized folders spanning 15 years. "Yes," I said. "I can do that." I started that night after Dad was asleep and Mom was settled with her evening TV shows that she watched without really understanding them anymore. I pulled out every folder, every receipt, every note I'd kept. The numbers added up fast. Home modifications, $43,000. Wheelchair ramps, walk-in shower, stair lift, hospital bed. Medical expenses not covered by insurance, $127,000. Specialists, medications, emergency room visits, in-home nurses for the times I got so exhausted I couldn't function. Lost income, $680,000. I'd taken early retirement from my job as a school administrator to move in with them. 15 years of salary, benefits, and pension contributions that I'd never get back. Personal expenses that I'd paid out of pocket rather than use their savings, $89,000. Groceries, utilities, gas for the car to drive them to appointments 3 times a week, and the time. The hours that couldn't be calculated in money. The 5,475 days I'd been here. The 131,400 hours. The moments that added up to a life I'd chosen to live, in service to the people who raised me. I'd kept notes, too. A journal that I'd started at the suggestion of a support group for caregivers. Small entries, just a few sentences each day, documenting the reality of our lives. March 3rd, Dad fell again at 2 a.m., spent 4 hours in the ER. He fractured his wrist. Karen called to ask if I could wire her money for a vacation to Cancun, June 17th. Mom forgot who I was today, called me by her sister's name and asked when I was going home. Later, she remembered and cried. I told her it was okay, not sure who I was trying to comfort, her or me. September 22nd. Karen visited for Dad's birthday, stayed for 2 hours, spent most of it on her phone. Didn't notice that Dad was wearing a different shirt than when she arrived because he'd spilled his lunch and I'd changed him. November 8th. Took Mom to the doctor. Early stage pneumonia. Karen texted to ask if I thought Mom would want her to have the china cabinet. The journal was devastating to read through all at once. 15 years of my life in small, steady entries that painted a picture I hadn't fully seen while living it. The weight of it, the loneliness, the love, but also the choice. Karen was right about one thing. I had chosen this, not out of martyrdom or manipulation, but because these were my parents, and someone had to do it, and that someone was going to be me. The difference was, my parents had seen that choice and honored it. Karen was angry because she wanted the inheritance without the sacrifice. Richard reviewed everything I'd compiled. We met in his office, the documents spread across his conference table like evidence at a trial. Which, I suppose, they were. "Evelyn," he said, looking up from the pages, "this is comprehensive. I'm an administrator, was an administrator. Organization is kind of my thing. This is more than organization. This is 15 years of your life, documented with the kind of detail that most people couldn't maintain for 15 days. He pulled out the expense reports. You've been paying for things out of pocket? Some things. When their savings got low, I didn't want them to worry about money on top of everything else. You understand you were under no legal obligation to do that. No. But I was under a moral one. He nodded slowly. Your sister's lawyer is going to argue that you had access to their finances, that you were in a position to exert undue influence. I know. But what they're going to have a hard time arguing against is this level of documentation. This isn't the pattern of someone manipulating elderly parents. This is the pattern of someone who sacrificed their own financial security to provide care. He picked up the journal. And this. Personal journals are powerful evidence. They show real-time documentation, not something created after the fact. So you think we can win? I think your sister has no idea what she's walking into. The mediation was scheduled for a Tuesday morning in April. Karen arrived with her lawyer, a sharp-faced woman in an expensive suit who looked at me like I was something unpleasant she'd found on her shoe. We sat across from each other at a long conference table. Karen wouldn't meet my eyes. I wondered if she felt guilty or if she was just that certain she was right. The mediator introduced herself and explained the process. Karen's lawyer went first, laying out their case: undue influence, isolation, financial manipulation. She made it sound like I'd imprisoned our parents and forced them to sign away Karen's inheritance at gunpoint. Then it was our turn. Richard opened his briefcase and pulled out the folders. All of them. He stacked them on the table, a tower of documentation that made Karen's lawyer's eyes widen slightly. These, Richard said calmly, are my client's records for the past 15 years. Every medical appointment, every expense, every hour of care provided. We have hospital records, doctor's notes, receipts, bank statements, and personal journals, all time-stamped, all verified, all painting a very clear picture of who actually took care of Mr. and Mrs. Patterson and at what cost. He opened the first folder and pulled out a spreadsheet. Mrs. Patterson incurred over $900,000 in expenses related to her parents' care. Most of that came from her own retirement savings. She also lost 15 years of income, pension contributions, and career advancement. Karen's lawyer leaned forward. That was her choice. Yes, it was. Richard agreed. Just as it was her parents' choice to acknowledge that sacrifice in their will. They were of sound mind when they made that decision. I was there. I witnessed it. And I have medical records from 3 different doctors confirming their mental competency at the time. He pulled out another folder. This is the journal my client kept. 15 years of daily entries. Would you like me to read some of them? That's not necessary, the mediator said quickly. But Richard was already opening it. March 15th, 2 years ago. Dad had a good day today. He remembered my name and asked about my job. I didn't tell him. I left my job 13 years ago. Let him have the good day. His voice was steady, but I saw Karen flinch. June 3rd, last year. Karen called to say she can't make it for Mom's birthday. 4th year in a row. Mom asked me 3 times today when Karen was coming. I lied and said soon. We don't need to hear Karen's lawyer started. October 7th. Used my savings to pay for Dad's new medications. Insurance won't cover them. Didn't tell Karen because I know what she'll say. That I'm enabling them. That they should go into a facility. That I'm wasting my life. The room was very quiet. Richard closed the journal. My client's parents understood exactly what she had sacrificed. They understood that while one daughter was living her life in Charlotte, the other daughter had put her entire life on hold to make sure they were comfortable, safe, and loved in their final years. That's not manipulation. That's devotion. And they wanted to honor that. He looked at Karen for the first time. Your parents didn't cut you out of their will to punish you, Miss Patterson. They made a decision to ensure that the child who gave up everything to care for them wouldn't be left with nothing. You still have your career, your husband, your home, your retirement. Your sister has this house, and whatever savings are left after funeral expenses. That seems more than fair. Karen's lawyer whispered something to her. Karen shook her head sharply. My client is prepared to take this to court, the lawyer said. We maintain that undue influence. Then we'll see you in court, Richard said pleasantly, where I'll present all of this evidence, plus testimony from doctors, nurses, and neighbors about who actually provided care for the last 15 years. I'll also present phone records showing the frequency of contact between both daughters and their parents. And I'll put Mrs. Patterson on the stand to read from her journal. All of it. Every entry, every sacrifice, every time she chose her parents over herself, while her sister chose everything else. He stood up. But I should warn you, these cases tend to be very public, and juries don't look kindly on adult children who abandoned their parents and then showed up demanding money. The mediation ended 30 minutes later. Karen agreed to drop the lawsuit in exchange for a few specific items from the house. Our grandmother's engagement ring, which Mom had already given to me, a painting she'd always liked, some books, small things that felt like permission for her to feel less guilty about walking away with something. We signed the paperwork in silence. When it was done, Karen finally looked at me. Are you happy now? She asked. I thought about it. No, I said honestly. I'm not happy that our parents are gone. I'm not happy that we spent our last years together fighting about money instead of grieving together. I'm not happy that you think I did any of this for an inheritance. Then why did you do it? Because they were my parents, and someone had to. And I knew that someone wasn't going to be you. She flinched like I'd hit her. Good. I wanted it to hurt. You know what the sad thing is? I continued. They asked about you every day, even at the end. When Dad barely knew his own name, he'd ask when you were coming to visit. And I'd make up excuses because I couldn't stand to see him disappointed. I protected you from their hurt feelings, and you repaid me by calling me a manipulator. Evelyn, I don't want to hear it. You made your choices. I made mine. The difference is, I can live with mine. I gathered my things and walked out. Richard followed me to the parking lot. That was harder than it needed to be, he said gently. I know. But she needed to hear it. She did. For what it's worth, your parents would be proud of how you handled this. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. That evening, I sat in the house that was now fully mine. The quiet felt different than it had before, less like loneliness, more like peace. I walked through the rooms slowly, touching the furniture my parents had chosen, looking at the photos on the walls. 15 years of my life had happened in these rooms. 15 years of small moments that added up to everything. I found myself in my old bedroom, the guest room I'd moved into when I first came back. My parents had left it mostly as it was when I lived here as a teenager. Floral wallpaper, a desk by the window, bookshelves filled with paperbacks I'd read in high school. On the nightstand was a photo I'd nearly forgotten about. Me and Karen, maybe 10 and 8 years old, our arms around each other, gap-toothed grins, best friends. I picked it up and looked at it for a long time. Then I set it face down in the drawer. Some things were too painful to look at every day. My phone buzzed. A text from Tom, my on-again, off-again partner of the past decade. He'd been patient beyond measure, understanding when I had to cancel dates to take Dad to the emergency room, supportive when I needed to vent about Karen, present in the ways he could be when my life was consumed by caregiving. Heard it went well today. Proud of you. Dinner when you're ready? I smiled and typed back. How about Friday? I think I might finally be ready, because that was the thing no one told you about caregiving. When it was over, when the person you'd devoted yourself to was gone, you had to figure out how to be yourself again, how to live a life that wasn't organized around medications and appointments and meals and safety checks. I was 71 years old, older than most people when they started their retirement. But I had this house, some savings, and for the first time in 15 years, I had time. Time to sleep past 6 a.m. if I wanted. Time to read books that weren't caregiver support guides. Time to take that trip to Ireland I'd been postponing since I was 56. Time to see if Tom and I could be more than just stolen moments between crises. Time to live. I wasn't bitter about the years I'd given my parents. I wasn't even bitter about Karen. Not really. She'd made her choices based on what she could live with, and I'd made mine. The difference was, when I looked back on those 15 years, I didn't see waste or sacrifice. I saw love, complicated, exhausting, frustrating, beautiful love, and that was worth more than any inheritance. 3 months later, I sold most of the furniture and put the house on the market. It sold in 2 weeks to a young family with 3 kids who promised to take care of the garden my mother had loved. I moved into a condo downtown, got a part-time consulting job with the school district, and started planning that trip to Ireland. Tom and I were taking things slow, but we were taking them together. Karen sent a card to my new address. Inside was a gift certificate to a restaurant and a note. Congratulations on your new place. No apology, no acknowledgement of what had happened, just a gift certificate and 4 words. I thought about not responding, but then I remembered that photo of us as kids, arms around each other, best friends. I sent back a simple text. Thank you. Not for the gift certificate, for the reminder that some relationships couldn't be saved, but they didn't have to end in bitterness either. I'd spent 15 years taking care of my parents because it was the right thing to do. Not for money, not for praise, but because love sometimes means showing up even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. And now, I was going to spend however many years I had left taking care of myself, because that was the right thing to do too. Standing in my new condo, looking out at the city lights, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Freedom, not from responsibility or from the memory of my parents, but from the weight of other people's expectations. From Karen's judgment, from society's assumptions about what an elderly daughter should do with her life, from the guilt that had followed me through those 15 years, every time I felt tired or resentful or simply human. I'd done what I set out to do. I'd honored my parents and myself, and I'd documented it all. Every receipt and journal entry, not because I knew I'd need them in court, but because I needed them for me. Proof that those years meant something, that the sacrifice was real and the love was real, and I hadn't just been playing nursemaid, as Karen had called it. I'd been a daughter, and that was enough. My phone rang. Tom. Hey, I said, smiling before I even heard his voice. Hey yourself. Still up for Ireland in the spring? Absolutely. Good, because I already booked the tickets. Figured it was about time we stopped waiting for someday. Someday sounds pretty good to me. I hung up and looked around my new place. Small, manageable, mine. The opposite of the sprawling family house where I'd spent the last decade and a half. Tomorrow, I'd start unpacking. Tonight, I'd just sit here in this moment, in this feeling of beginning something new at an age when most people were settling into endings. 71 wasn't old, It was just getting started, and I understood that enough to live it on my own terms.